What's up, everyone? My name is Keith Fleming, host of the Daily Fix Show on Fantasy and Frames podcast, as well as the director of DFS content for Fantasy and Frames. And I'm here to hopefully help you win some money for Conference Championship weekend on DraftKings. Before I get into the lineup that I'm going to give for the Conference Championship weekend, be sure to subscribe to the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel. You can find more videos like mine, as well as starting right after the Super Bowl, we will be doing rookie profiles on tons of players that are entering the NFL draft. So there's a bunch of good content to come, so be sure to do that. But again, I'm here today to hopefully help you win some money, and I'm going to do a lineup for the Conference Championship slate. That's both games. And we're actually going to have other videos that will be up as well for Captain Showdowns just for the AFC and NFC. But let's get right into this. QB, I'm going Joe Burrow, 6,800. In 3 games versus KC, scored at least 18.5 points. And all of them had 30 or more in 2 of 3. He's been great in the playoffs, 240 passing yards or more in 5 of his 6 career games, multi-touchdowns in half of those, averaging over 10 yards per game on the ground, which that's just free points for quarterbacks, so we'll take them. And as crazy as it sounds, especially with Mahomes playing against him in this game, I think Burrow is the QB that you can trust the most this weekend for Conference Championship. Running back, I'm going Jerick McKinnon. He had 14 points in the regular season matchup versus the Bengals earlier this year. He disappointed a lot of us, including me and my co-host Joe Matz last week when he only had 2.5 points versus Jacksonville. But I think this might lead to lower ownership this week, which is good for us. Because remember, last year in the playoffs, he he scored 12.5 points or more in all 3 games. He averaged 100 total yards per game during that, almost 5 receptions per. Again, for DK, full PPR, that's free points. We'll take them. And just in their 2 playoff games, Cincy giving up a lot of receptions to running backs, 13 for 108 and a score. And then if you go back and include those playoff games, their last 10 games, they've given up at least 4 receptions, 2 running backs, 8 of the last 10, 5 or more. I think he's a really safe play, especially with Mahomes being banged up. Probably he's not going to be able to move around as much, meaning they may need a lot more short passes. Most of Mahomes' big plays come from him scrambling around, buying time. I don't think he's going to be able to do that on the bad ankle. So I really like McKinnon this week. I'm going back to the well. Joe Mixon's my other back, 6,500. He's coming off a really nice 23-point effort last week. He averaged 65.5 yards on the ground in the 2021 playoffs. 4.5 receptions per, again, free points, we'll take it, and over 15 points per game on DraftKings. KC is not a really stout run D. It's been evident by ETN last week. He had over 100 yards on just 16 carries. And in the first matchup, Mixon missed this game, but remember that P-Rhyme had over 100 yards on the ground on 21 carries. And Cincinnati tends to run the ball more in the playoffs. Mixon averages 14.6 carries per game during the regular season this year. He averaged 17 per game last year. He's averaging 15.5 this year. I just think it's a good matchup for Mixon. All right, first wide receiver and the lock of the century, Jamar Chase, 7,600. I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but in 3 games versus Kansas City, he's averaging 9 targets, 8 receptions, 139 yards per game, 30.6 points per game on DK. Now, a lot of that obviously comes from the monster game that he had last year to actually clinch Cincinnati's spot in the playoffs. But he also has had at least 16.7 points in all these games. So he's a safe play. And in the postseason, I mean, Burrow goes to him a lot, and rightfully so. Over 9 targets, over 6 receptions, almost 20 points per game on DK. And KC is second to last in the NFL DVOA versus number 1 wide receivers. He's a lock. Jamar Chase should be in every lineup. Devontae Smith is my second, 6,800. San Francisco's weakness in their defense is definitely the secondary, particularly on DK, giving up points to receivers. Just in their last 5 games, obviously CeeDee Lamb last week, 10 for 117 on 13 targets. Metcalf the week before had a monster game, 10 for 136, 2 touchdowns on 13 targets. Remember, Lockett had 6 receptions in that game. Last week of the season, A.J. Green had 3 for 91 and a touchdown on 5 targets. And Devontae Adams, the second to last game of the year, 7 for 153, 2 touchdowns, 11 targets. You can really get at this defense from the wide receiver position. You might ask me, Keith, why are you going with Devontae Smith over A.J. Brown? Because I do have money to have either one of them in this lineup. Over their last 10 games, Smith has been the number one receiver. Brown, the last 10 games, 4.8 receptions, 7.6 targets, 80 yards per game, 5 touchdowns, 16.5 points on DK. Smith in that same time, 6 receptions, 9.3 targets, 81.2 yards, 16 touchdowns, 19.48 points per game on DK. So across the board, he's been the number one receiver. I'm going with him this week. My cheap play in this lineup, or one of the two, is Juwan Jennings, 3,300. I have enough money to pivot to either Tyler Boyd at 3,800 or Kadarius Toney at 3,700. I don't think I'm going to do it to Boyd because I don't want to overload on Bengals. I already have Burrow, Mixon, and Chase. You'll hear I have Hurst in this lineup as well. I am still considering Toney. I need to know what happens with Hardman, whether or not he plays, but Toney has scored double digits in 3 straight. And I actually think Mahomes being banged up might up Toney's value because he is one of those receivers. He doesn't need the ball to be thrown way down the field to put up big numbers. He had a season-high 7 targets, 6 receptions last week. But I'm going to go right now with Jennings, and I think that's where I'm going to stay because I have a lot of chalk in this lineup. I don't think Jennings is going to be high owned. And he's the wide receiver for the Niners who lines up in the slot the most, 43% of the time. The other 3 stud receivers for them, Samuel 16%, Ayuk 12%, Kittle 13%. And the Eagles, they have a great pass D. There's no doubt in that, but they do struggle with slot receivers. 13.8 yards per reception to receivers from the slot, 13 receptions a game. And this is the big one, 22 touchdowns. That was 3rd in the NFL. Jennings has 3 or more targets in 5 of his 8 games with Purdy. And even with Samuel back from injury, he's still seeing a 45% snap share. I think there's a chance he scores a touchdown. It's kind of a hunch, but again, the Eagles give up a lot of plays to receivers from the slot. Jennings is a slot receiver. That's why he's there. Hayden Hurst is my tight end, 3,000. He's seen 4 more receptions, or has 4 more receptions in his last 3. He's seen 6 targets in both playoff games. Big thing for me, 5 red zone targets his last 3 games. He's got a true catch rate of 98.2%. He's one of the most reliable receivers in the league. That's obviously, I think, why Burrow is starting to go to him more in games that matter. And KC is 15th on DK in points allowed to tight ends. But if you really look at it, that is from what they did early in the year, not late. Over their last 6 games, allowing opposing tight ends 6.5 receptions per. Tight ends have 5+ in 5 of 6 games. Over 50 yards receiving in those games, 40+ yards in 4 of 6, 30+ in all 6, and then 4 touchdowns in that span. I think Chase is obviously the monster play for the Bengals, but I think Hurst, potentially Boyd. You're going to see Burrow try to get rid of the ball quickly. Remember, the offensive line is banged up for Cincinnati. I really like him, especially at that price at $3,000. The flex, don't overthink it. It's Travis Kelce, 7,800. I spoke on the Daily Fix last week about his ridiculous success in the playoffs, and then he went out and had 14 catches, 98 yards, 2 scores. So just to remind everyone, over his last 7 playoff games, he's averaging 9.7 receptions. He's had 8+ in 6 of 7. 108 yards per game. He's had 90+ in 6 of 7. 8 touchdowns. He scored in 6 of those 7 games. Averaging 28.97 points on DraftKings. That's unbelievable. He scored 24 or more in 6 of 7. And oh, by the way, the one game he didn't, he scored 23.6. Travis Kelce should be in every lineup. No matter what you do, I think Chase and Kelce need to be in your lineup, filling around there. I'm going the Bengals, 2,300 for my defense. I had to choose with my salary between the Bengals and the Chiefs. Obviously, I like the Bengals a lot more. Mahomes is banged up. I just think that they're the safer play. Their defense has been playing great despite injuries. So I have $500 left over, so I can make that shift to Toney or Boyd. If not, and I've said this on the pod several times, I like in these smaller slates leaving salary. I mean, don't get crazy and have like $1,000, but if you have $500-$600, it's less likely people are going to share lineups with you. When again, there's a lot less options for lineups this week. So I hope that helps you win some money for Conference Championship weekend. Again, we'd appreciate if you would subscribe to the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel. Please be sure to check out the Daily Fix show on the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network, where you see me and Joe Matz breaking down all the DFS action each week. And we will see you guys soon.